My name is Cora Valerius, and for as long as I can remember, my life has been rooted in the damp, rich earth of Mistwood Isle. It's a small jewel of land off the coast of Oregon, a place where mist clings to the ancient cedars like a whispered secret, and the air smells perpetually of salt and wet soil. My grandfather, Silas Valerius, brought our family here generations ago, building not just a home, but an empire from the timber that forested these hills. To the world, he was a titan of industry. To me, he was the man who taught me how to listen to the language of leaves and the patience of a sprouting seed. This inheritance, the land, the sprawling Stonebriar house, and the heart of it all, his state-of-the-art conservatory, was never about money. It was about a shared understanding, a quiet promise passed between us. It was a promise my family, arriving on the afternoon ferry with storm clouds gathering in their eyes, could never comprehend. The gentle hum of the conservatory's climate control system was a sound more comforting to me than any symphony. It was the breath of the life I curated within these glass walls, rows of endangered ferns unfurling delicate fronds, shelves of heirloom seeds catalogued in small, hand-labeled clay pots, and in the center, my life's work. The study of epigenetic memory in rare, resilient flora. The air was thick with the scent of petrichor and blooming nightshade. It was my sanctuary. Until today. The swish of the automated glass door was sharper than usual. My mother, Isabel, stood silhouetted against the gray afternoon light, her tailored cashmere coat a stark, pale intrusion in my world of green and brown. My father, Julian, and my brother, Adrian, flanked her, their faces set in grim, determined lines. Cora, my mother's voice was clipped, devoid of its usual social grace. She surveyed the conservatory not as a place of wonder, but as an asset to be liquidated. This has gone on long enough. I was misting the delicate leaves of a ghost orchid, its spectral white blooms seeming to float in the humid air. I finished the motion, my hands steady, and set the bottle down on my workbench, which was littered with soil samples, glass slides, and my grandfather's old leather-bound journals. "Hello, Mother. I wasn't expecting you all today." "Of course you weren't," Adrian scoffed, stepping forward. He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, his city slicker suit looking utterly alien amongst the hanging vines. "You're perfectly happy to hide away here with your plants while the rest of us deal with the real world." Adrian was in the tech startup game, a world of frantic energy, burn rates, and billion-dollar valuations that felt as foreign to me as the dark side of the moon. "Adrian has a new venture, a very promising one," my father added, his voice a low rumble of disapproval. He was a man who had lived his whole life in his own father's shadow, managing the vestiges of the Valerius timber and holdings company with competence, but no real passion. "It requires significant capital." The estate, he let the word hang in the air, heavy with implication. I turned to face them fully, leaning back against the sturdy oak of my workbench. I felt the familiar calm of this place settle over me, a shield against their rising tide of resentment. Grandfather's will was very clear. He left the estate to me. My mother's laugh was a brittle, sharp sound that startled a finch in a nearby cage. "Oh, Cora, don't be so naive. Your grandfather was an old man. He was sentimental. He didn't understand the practicalities. Adrian has a family, a future to build. What do you have?" "Dirt and weeds." She gestured dismissively at a tray of carefully cultivated alpine mosses I'd spent 5 years coaxing to fruit. The sting of her words was an old, familiar ache. For years, my work had been dismissed as a quaint hobby, my passion for botany a childish eccentricity that I was supposed to have outgrown. Only Grandfather Silas had seen it for what it was, a continuation of his own secret passion. "This dirt and weeds, as you call it, is important research, Mother," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "It's the reason he left this place to me. He knew I would protect it." "Protect it?" Isabel's voice rose, a shrill note in the conservatory's peaceful hum. She strode over to a row of meticulously labeled seed trays, her heels clicking on the stone floor. "You're hoarding it. This land, this house, it's worth millions. It's family money, and it should be used to support the family. We've spoken to our lawyers. We're prepared to contest the will on the grounds of undue influence. I thought of the letter my grandfather had left me, tucked safely inside a hollowed-out copy of Darwin's The Origin of Species. The letter that explained everything. The letter that would change the very soil on which our family stood. I had hoped I would never have to use it. I had hoped they would, for once, try to understand. Contesting the will would be a mistake, I said softly. The only mistake was Silas indulging your fantasies for all these years. Adrian snapped. He pulled out his phone, already scrolling, as if the conversation was a boring meeting he had to endure. Look, Cora, be reasonable. We'll give you a stipend, enough to set up a little greenhouse somewhere else. But the main property has to be sold. It's the only logical thing to do. I looked from my brother's dismissive face to my father's weary resignation, to my mother's brittle anger. They saw the land as a commodity, the house as real estate, the conservatory as a liability. They didn't see the living, breathing legacy it represented. They didn't see the truth hidden in the very cells of the plants I studied, a truth mirrored in our own blood. No, I said. The word was simple, absolute. It felt like sinking a root deep into solid ground. I will not sell. I will not sign anything over. This is my home, and this is my work. My mother's face hardened. You're being selfish, Cora. You've always been selfish, content in your own little world, never thinking about the rest of us. Is it selfish to honor a man's dying wish? I countered, my gaze unwavering. A man who gave all of you everything? A tense silence fell, broken only by the drip of water from a hanging fern. For a moment, I saw a flicker of something uncertain in my father's eyes, in the memory of the man Silas had been, before he dismissed it. Julian, call Mr. Ashworth, Isabel commanded, turning her back on me. Tell him we're moving forward. And you, she spun back to me, her finger pointing, you will find that sentimentality doesn't stand up in a court of law. I felt a profound sadness wash over me, but beneath it, a new and unfamiliar strength was taking root. The strength of someone who knows they are standing on solid ground, in every sense of the word. They thought this was a battle over money and property. They had no idea it was a reckoning with the truth. Actually, I said, walking over to my grandfather's old writing desk in the corner, that won't be necessary. I already spoke with Mr. Ashworth this morning. I asked him to join us. The confidence in my voice seemed to throw them off balance. Adrian looked up from his phone. What are you talking about? I think it's time we all had a conversation about grandfather's legacy, I said, my hand resting on the worn spine of the Darwin book. The whole legacy, not just the parts you can see on a balance sheet. Right on cue, the conservatory door swished open again. Mr. Ashworth, our family's lawyer for over 40 years, stepped inside. He was a tall, stoic man with a face as weathered as the island's cliffs, and he held a heavy leather briefcase in one hand. His eyes met mine, and he gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. Isabel, Julian, Adrian, he greeted them, his voice calm and steady. Cora said you might be here. She felt it was time to clarify some of the finer points of her grandfather's estate. My family stared, a mixture of confusion and irritation on their faces. They had come here for an ambush, expecting me to crumble. They had walked into a story that had been waiting decades to be told. I took a deep breath, the air fragrant with life and soil, and prepared to turn the first page. The conservatory, my sanctuary of quiet growth, became a makeshift courtroom. Mr. Ashworth cleared a space on my workbench, pushing aside a tray of germinating seeds with a careful hand. He opened his briefcase with a pair of decisive clicks that echoed in the humid air. My mother, father, and brother stood stiffly, a united front of impatience and suspicion. I chose to sit on a low stool, positioning myself beside a cascading wall of ivy, feeling its living presence as a source of strength. Before we discuss legal challenges, Mr. Ashworth began, his tone leaving no room for argument. Silas left specific instructions with me. He anticipated this disagreement. He asked that in the event of a dispute, I present you with some context for his decisions. He pulled out a thick file folder, tied with a faded blue ribbon. From it, he produced a series of documents, laying them out in a neat row. They were old, some of the pages yellowed with age. They were medical records, genealogical charts, and lab reports. "What is all this?" Julian demanded, leaning forward to peer at the papers. "My father was a lumberman, not a physician." "Your father, Julian, was a man of many interests," Mr. Ashworth said gently. "His primary passion, as Cora knows, was not timber. It was botany. And through botany, he became fascinated with genetics." I watched their faces, seeing the first seeds of confusion being sown. Adrian let out an exasperated sigh. "Can we get to the point? What does any of this have to do with the estate?" "Everything," I said softly, and all eyes turned to me. Grandfather wasn't just a hobbyist. He was a brilliant, self-taught geneticist. His work in the timber industry was a means to an end. It funded his research. "This conservatory isn't a greenhouse, it's a laboratory." I stood and walked to a locked cabinet beneath my desk. Using a small, antique brass key I wore on a chain around my neck, I opened it and retrieved my own files, binders filled with DNA sequences, Punnett squares, and detailed notes on plant hybridization. I laid them next to my grandfather's. The methodologies were more modern, the equipment I used more advanced, but the path of inquiry was identical. "For the past 10 years," I explained, my voice steady, "I haven't just been breeding rare flowers. I've been continuing his research. We were studying hereditary patterns, not just in plants, but in our own family." A heavy silence descended. The hum of the humidifiers seemed to grow louder. "Our family," I continued, pointing to a highlighted section in one of my grandfather's old charts, "has a history of a rare metabolic condition. It's recessive, often asymptomatic, but it's there. Great Aunt Clara had it. So did one of my grandfather's cousins. He was trying to map its inheritance." "This is ridiculous," Isabel said, her voice tight with anxiety. "What are you trying to imply, Cora?" "I'm not implying anything. I'm presenting facts." "Scientific facts," I said. "The inheritance pattern of this condition in our family doesn't make sense according to classical genetics. It appears in places it shouldn't and disappears where it should be present." Grandfather spent decades trying to figure out why. He thought he'd made a mistake in his understanding of the science. Mr. Ashworth slid a final document to the center of the table. It was a DNA analysis report, dated 1978. He hadn't made a mistake in the science, the lawyer said, his gaze fixed on my father. The data was simply pointing to a different conclusion. "Julian, your father conducted this test when you were hospitalized for appendicitis as a young man. He was desperate to understand the anomalies in his research. This test provided the answer." My father stared at the paper, his face slowly losing all its color. He didn't need to read the fine print. The conclusion was stated in stark, unavoidable type. "The metabolic condition couldn't be passed from Silas to you, Julian," I explained, my voice filled with a sadness for the blow I knew was coming, "because you don't share his DNA. You are not his biological son." The air left the room. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Adrian looked back and forth between my father and the document, his own confident facade cracking like dry earth. That's not possible. You're lying." "This is a trick," he stammered, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You forged this to keep the money." "It's no trick, Adrian," Mr. Ashworth said, his voice imbued with the gravity of a truth long held. "Silas confirmed it with multiple tests over the years. He knew. He made the decision to raise Julian as his own, to love him as his own, and to protect his wife, your grandmother, from the scandal. He never spoke a word of it to anyone. He simply carried the knowledge." My father stumbled back, sinking onto a wooden bench. He looked at his hands, then at my mother, then at the glass ceiling, as if the sky itself had just fallen. 40 years of his identity had been built on a foundation that had just crumbled into dust. "So, my whole life," he whispered, his voice cracking. "This is why he left the estate to me," I said, trying to pull the focus back to the present, to the reason. Not out of spite, not to punish anyone. The research was his life's real work. And biologically, you and Adrian couldn't continue it. He needed someone of his own bloodline, someone who shared his aptitude. Adrian's head snapped up, his eyes blazing with a desperate, cornered anger. "Bloodline? What are you talking about? If Dad isn't his son, then none of us are Valerius's. Not you, not me. It makes no sense." This was the final, most delicate piece of the truth. I took a deep breath, my heart aching for the pain I was about to cause, but knowing it was the only way forward. I looked at my mother, whose face was now a mask of pure dread. She knew what was coming. Mr. Ashworth, ever the calm steward of difficult truths, slid one last piece of paper across the workbench. It was my own birth certificate, alongside another DNA report, this one from the year I was born. There was another secret Silas carried, the lawyer said, his voice softening with something akin to pity. He had a son from a brief, early marriage before he met your grandmother. A young man named Finian. I watched my mother's composure finally shatter. A single tear traced a path through her makeup. "Finian Valerius," I said, picking up the narrative. "He was a botanist, like me. Brilliant, by all accounts. He spent a summer here, working with grandfather in this very conservatory, the year before he died in a climbing accident." I paused, letting the name settle in the air. My mother was here that summer too. The unspoken truth was suddenly deafening. Adrian stared at my mother, his expression a maelstrom of confusion and dawning horror. My father looked up from his stupor, his gaze hollow. "Silas wasn't just my grandfather," I stated, my voice barely a whisper. "Finian was my biological father. That's why the Valerius genetic markers, the metabolic condition, and the passion for this work are present in me. I am Silas Valerius's only biological grandchild." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a world remade. My father, the man who had raised me, was not my father. My brother was my half-brother. And my mother had hidden the most profound secret of all. The carefully constructed edifice of the Valerius family, a structure I had always felt on the outside of, had just collapsed. "Isabel?" My father's voice was broken, pleading. My mother couldn't answer. She simply sank into a chair, her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent, racking sobs. Adrian stood frozen, his world of clear-cut deals and decisive action rendered meaningless. He looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I didn't see arrogance or dismissal in his eyes. I saw a man completely and utterly lost. The estate, the research, the house, it was never just a gift, I said, my voice thick with emotion. It was a baton, a legacy. Grandfather couldn't leave it to anyone else. It had to be me. He wasn't trying to hurt you. He was trying to preserve the truth. Mr. Ashworth began quietly packing the documents back into his briefcase, his work done. The revelations lay scattered among us like fallen leaves after a storm. The air in the conservatory, usually so full of life and peace, was now charged with the volatile energy of shattered certainties. My family had come to claim an inheritance. Instead, they had lost their history. And I, in securing my legacy, had been forced to unearth the secrets that would change us all forever. The weeks following the revelation were like the quiet, gray days that settle over the island after a fierce winter storm. The world is altered, the landscape reshaped, and the air is still and heavy with the memory of the gale. My family retreated, each into their own cocoon of shock and grief. The Stonebriar house, usually filled with a low hum of history, felt vast and silent. I spent most of my time in the conservatory, finding solace in the steady, unjudging cycle of life, death, and rebirth that played out on my workbenches. The plants didn't care about bloodlines or secrets. They cared only for light, water, and time. My father, Julian, was the first to leave. He packed a bag 2 days later and went to stay at the family's small apartment in Harbor's End, the city across the Sound. He needed distance, not from me, but from the house, from the portraits of Silas, from the life he now saw as a fabrication. He didn't say goodbye. I would find the front door left slightly ajar, a quiet signal of his departure. My heart ached for him, for the man who had taught me how to ride a bike and bait a fishing hook, the man whose identity had been stripped away in a single afternoon. Our relationship, once simple, was now a complex territory we would have to navigate without a map. My brother, Adrian, surprised me. I expected anger, resentment, perhaps even another legal threat. Instead, I got silence. For 2 weeks, I heard nothing. Then one Tuesday morning, he appeared at the conservatory door, not in a suit, but in jeans and a worn fleece jacket. He looked tired, the sharp edges of his ambition softened by exhaustion. He didn't speak at first, just walked slowly through the aisles, looking at the plants with an attention I'd never seen from him before. He stopped by the ghost orchid, which was still in bloom. "Is this the one, Mom, almost?" He didn't finish the sentence. "She was upset," I said, not making excuses, just stating a fact. He nodded, running a hand over his face. "I've been doing some reading," he said, his voice rough. "About him?" "Finian." My breath caught. "Oh!" "There's not much online. A few university articles, an obituary. Said he was a prodigy in plant genetics. Specialized in stress response in alpine flora." He looked at me, a genuine question in his eyes. "Is that what you do?" "A version of it," I admitted. "I study how plants pass the memory of resilience to their offspring without changing their core DNA. It's called epigenetics." He was quiet for a long moment. "So the whole time, you were just like him?" It wasn't an accusation. It was a statement of dawning understanding. "And Grandfather Silas saw it?" "He did," I said. "I'm sorry, Cora," he said, finally meeting my gaze. The words seemed to cost him a great deal. "For everything. For calling your work a hobby. For not seeing. I saw the world in dollars and cents. In growth charts and investor decks. Silas's world, your world, it's a different language." It was the most honest thing he had ever said to me. An opening. A small, green shoot pushing its way through rubble. "He wanted to start a foundation, I said, testing the new ground between us. The Valerius Seed Sanctuary. To preserve rare and heirloom species, but also to fund public domain research based on his work. I have the botanical knowledge, but I have no idea how to build something like that." A flicker of the old Adrian sparked in his eyes, but it was different now, tempered. "A nonprofit foundation? That requires a business plan, a board, an endowment strategy." He paused, a slow smile spreading across his face. "I know a guy who's good at that stuff." It wasn't a solution to everything, but it was a start. It was a bridge. My mother's reconciliation was the most difficult. She remained in her wing of the great house, a ghost in her own home. One evening, I found her in the library, sitting in the dark, a glass of untouched brandy on the table beside her. I didn't turn on the light, just sat in the armchair opposite her. "He was beautiful," she said into the darkness, her voice a raw whisper. "Finian. He was like a force of nature himself. So alive. Your grandfather adored him, but he also worried. Finian took risks. In the mountains, in his life." She took a shaky breath. "I loved your father, Julian. I truly did. But Finian, it was a summer storm. Intense and beautiful and over too soon. When I found out I was pregnant, he was already gone. I was terrified. I told no one. But grandfather knew," I said gently. "He knew," she confirmed. "He confronted me a few years after you were born. Not with anger, but with this profound sadness. He said he saw his son in your eyes, in the way you'd get lost watching an ant carry a leaf. He said, "We will keep this secret, Isabel. We will protect the family." And he did. He protected me. He gave Julian a father, and he gave me a life without shame. Her voice broke. And in return, I tried to take his legacy from you. The one thing he truly cared about. Tears streamed down her face, tears of guilt and grief held back for 30 years. I went to her, knelt by her chair, and for the first time since I was a little girl, she wrapped her arms around me and held on tight. In the shared darkness of the library, surrounded by the ghosts of our family's past, we grieved for the secrets that had both protected and broken us. A month after the revelation, Mr. Ashworth sent a final package. It contained a single, thick envelope, sealed with Silas's wax signet, a V entwined with an ash leaf. The instructions were to open it 1 month after the contents of the file were shared. I took it to the conservatory, my true home, and sat at my workbench. The late afternoon sun slanted through the glass, casting long shadows. My hands trembled slightly as I broke the seal. The letter was in my grandfather's familiar, elegant script. "My dearest Cora," it began. "If you are reading this, then the hardest part is over. I am sorry for the burden of the truth I have laid at your feet, but I trusted no one else with its weight. A family cannot thrive on a foundation of secrets any more than a tree can grow in poisoned soil. Sometimes the ground must be tilled, no matter how painful, to allow for new growth. I have watched you your entire life, and in you, I saw the brilliant spark of my son, Finian, rekindled. That spark was my hope. He and I were on the verge of a discovery, something far more significant than mapping a simple hereditary condition. We found that certain plants, under specific environmental stresses, produce unique proteins that can activate dormant, beneficial genes in other species. It was a theory, a wild hypothesis. His death ended our work. But you, my dear girl, you have unknowingly picked up the thread. Your research into epigenetic memory is the other half of the equation. The estate, the money, it was all to provide you with the time, resources, and sanctuary to complete this work, free from the pressures of a world that would seek to patent and profit from it before it is fully understood. There is a safe, hidden behind the 1886 botanical illustration of the Sequoia sempervirens in my study. The combination is the year of Finian's birth, the month of his death, and your own birthday. Inside, you will find all our original research. Our notes, our failures, and our one successful preliminary trial. It is yours now. All of it. The legacy is not one of timber or money, Cora. It is a legacy of wonder, of curiosity, and of the profound, interconnected web of life. You are the culmination of it. Be brave. Be patient. And continue to listen to the trees. They have much to teach us. With all my love. Your grandfather, Silas. Tears blurred the words. I walked from the conservatory, through the quiet halls of the house, to his study. The giant, framed redwood illustration hung majestically over the fireplace. I found the hidden catch, swung the frame open, and saw the dull metal of the safe. My fingers, slick with nervous sweat, fumbled with the dial. 4-8-1-5, the numbers that wove our 3 lives together. The lock clicked open. Inside, it was filled not with jewels or bonds, but with leather-bound journals and carefully preserved lab notes. I lifted the top one. Finian's handwriting, a bold, energetic scrawl so different from his father's, filled the page. My phone vibrated on the desk. A text from Adrian. Draft of the Foundation's mission statement is in your inbox. Let me know your thoughts. Dad's coming back to the island this weekend. He wants to talk. I looked from the phone to the open safe, to the treasure trove of knowledge that represented 3 generations of passion. The storm had passed. The ground was tilled. A painful truth had made way for a more authentic one, and the first signs of new growth were all around me. I pulled out Finian's first journal, settled into my grandfather's worn leather chair, and began to read. The work was just beginning.